Have you ever wondered how musicians figure out the key of a song? It's easier than you think. And today I'm going to show you how to do it both by ear and by reading chords. Stick around for some practical tips and tricks that will take your playing to the next level. Welcome to Strums to Stage. I'm Andrew Wink, and I'm here to help musicians like you go from players to performers, creators, and leaders in your music scene. Today, we're diving into how to find the key of the song on guitar, a must have skill for jamming, songwriting, and performing. Let's dive in and take your music journey to the next level. First, let's talk about what the key of a song actually is and why it matters. The key tells you the tonal center of the song, the note and scale that the entire piece revolves around. For example, if a song is in the key of C, it's built around the C major scale and its chords. So its root scale is going to be a C major chord. Knowing the key helps you understand which chords and notes will sound good together. It's like having a musical roadmap that makes playing and improvising and collaborating so much easier. We'll jump into a couple of scales, but first the follow-up question, what is a scale? A scale is a set pattern of spaces in between notes, and those spaces are measured by what's called intervals. So for example, I'm going to use the C major scale to begin. We start on the note C, which is our first note in the scale and our home base. This is why it's called the C major scale. Now, that's why it's called the C major scale, I should say. It's called a major scale because it follows a set pattern of intervals, which we'll measure on frets on the guitar. So we go up in what's called whole steps or half steps. A half step, visualizing on guitar, is one fret. So if I go up a half step from where I currently am now, I'm just going to go up one fret towards the body. So the pitch sounds a little bit higher. And then the same thing for the other direction. If I want to go down a half step, slide down towards the headstock and the pitch goes lower. And two halves make a whole. So you go up a whole step and then down a whole step. So the pattern for the major scale, well, this goes whole step, whole step, whole step, half, whole, half. And we start with the C major scale because it includes all natural notes, meaning it's going to have the letters exactly of the alphabet exactly as they are with nothing else added to it. When we get to the E minor scale, we'll talk through a bit more what that means. But essentially, we'll start on C, I'll go up a whole step to D, a whole step to E, a half step to F, a whole step up to G, a whole step up to A, a whole step up to B, and then one last half step up to C. Okay, so each note has a set interval number. So our C is 1, number 2, 3, so on and so forth. Now, this translates really nicely into chords. So if we go to our C major chord, for instance, we're going to start on the 1, which is a C, and then if you add the second note, which is fret 2 on the D string underneath, that's actually an E. So these are, for all intents and purposes, the same pitch. The only slightly difference is where I'm pressing on the guitar. So we have our first, or our root, we have our third, which is E, and then we have the open G underneath, which is our fifth, and then we have the octave underneath of there on C. So all you need for a major scale, for a major chord, excuse me, is the root, the third, the fifth, and then you can add as many octaves on top of that as well. So we have the octave again, and then an octave over the third. Now we're going to move on to the E minor scale, which is relevant to the song we're going to talk about a little bit later. The difference between a major and a minor scale is the pattern of intervals. So it goes a different pattern, whole steps and half steps, essentially. So I'm going to start on E. In this case, I'm going to do the low E string. And then we're going to go up another whole step to F sharp. Now, this is where it gets a little weird. Some notes, you'll go 2 frets up, you'll go a whole step up to hit them naturally. But for E to F and B to C, you only go up a half step. So if you go a whole step from E, you go up to F sharp, which sharp always means half step higher than its natural note. But that second whole step is going to be is critical to play the minor scale correctly and the major scale correctly as well. So we go whole step up to F sharp, and then here's where the pattern changes. We go a half step up to G, and then a whole step up to A, a whole step up to B, a half step up to C, a whole step up to D, and then a whole step up to E, which is now our octave. So The pattern itself is a little bit different, but you also notice that the notes are not all natural. We have an F sharp that's thrown in there, which that is the key difference that I wanted to point out here, because every scale is going to have a mix and match of natural notes, sharp notes, and also flat notes, which are a half step lower than natural notes. So determining where those pitches fall is going to be key to finding the key of the song. So let's take a brief listen to the verse of the song Like George Bailey by my band Grimm. I picked that song because the verse chord progression is it makes it pretty easy to determine the key from there. And we're going to look at it by listening by ear and then through chord progressions. So let's begin by picking out chords by ear. So first thing we're going to listen for, we're going to listen to each chord as best we can hear it, and then play the lowest note that we hear. So the first note, when the full band comes in, is pretty low. So I'm going to start on my open E string and go from there. And actually, hey presto, that's pretty dead on for what it is. So we think it's an E. So it could be either E major or E minor. So let me try E major first. Yeah, it sounds a little happy for that. Let me try E minor. That's pretty dead on for it. So we're working with the first chord. It's probably an E minor. What about that second one? So it's probably, we're going to follow that bass note again. It's closer on A. So it starts there. So actually it starts on C. But if we play the regular C chord, it's close, but not quite. So this chord is actually a little bit tricky. It's what's called a C add 9. Actually, not quite that voicing. There we go. So what the C add 9 is, a ninth is essentially an octave above the second. So remember our C major scale, so C, D, so it adds an extra D in there. In this case, it's going to be fret 3 on the B string. And then I have fret 3 on the high E. That's a G, so it's the fifth of the C major chord, so it fits in nicely anyway. It's just what's called a different voicing, or essentially a different stacking of our thirds, fifths over octaves. So that's our second chord. And then the next one goes a little higher, so it's a D, and then there's another chord in there. Actually, I'm just going to give this one away. So that's a D4, D sus4, which adds an extra note and then comes back down. So we have So that would be the process of how you determine the chords by ear. Another way that you can determine what the chords are is look up a chord chart, and that which I happen to have right here. So looking at the chords for the verse, we have E minor, C add 9, D, D sus4, and then D. So obviously looking at chord charts makes it smoother to give an idea of what you're looking for, particularly in the beginning, but those chords may not be correct, depending on what the source material is. So using both your ears and chord charts written material is going to be the best way to determine the chords from there. The next step is determining those notes within the triad. Now remember, for each of these chords, well, for nearly all of these chords, we're going to have at least a major third, at least a root, a third, and a fifth. The root and fifth are going to be the same between major and minor chords. The third is going to be either a major or a minor note, and then there's a couple of other tricks with these chords that I'll explain as we go through. So for E minor, looking at that chord, so actually I'll play it on guitar to begin where we begin. But if we strum through each of the strings, we have E, that's a B, so we have the root and then the fifth, and then we actually have an octave. But then underneath that, that's our G, so that's our third, and then B on top of that. So our root, third, and fifth for the E minor chord is E, G, and B. Okay, and the next step is C add 9. So the C add 9 is the C major chord, but it adds a D on top of that. So looking at those notes, which we just talked about with C, we have C, we have E, G, and then B, and then G again. So that's our C add 9. Next up, we have D. So looking at those triads, actually we can play that with the D chord as well. So we have D, that is A, then we have D, and then we have F sharp because we have E to F sharp. So the sharp is a pretty big giveaway for us. So that tells us that it's not C. Um, I'm just mentally going through them all. I think we've got nearly all the letters of our musical alphabet anyway, except for one or two. So now that we know which notes are sharps or naturals in our scale, we're going to use a tool called the circle of fifths to determine the key of the song. So we have letters on the top on the outside of our circle, and then we have letters on the inside of our circle, these are actually all scales. So we have C at the very top, which is by design. The reason that it is at the top is because this scale is all natural. There's no sharps or flats or any accidentals in this scale, so that's why it's on the very top. And if you go to the right of the circle, you're going to gradually add more sharps as you go down the scale. So you have one sharp, two sharps, three sharps, and then so on. Um, and then if you go down on the left side, you actually add more flats. So we have one flat for F major scale, two flats for B flat major scale, and so on and so forth. If you continued with sharps or flats in one direction or another, when you get beyond seven, you're going to add double sharps, double flats, and it gets really confusing from there. So really, you'll switch from sharps probably to flats. And right here, G flat at the bottom of the scale, this is that intersection. So you'll have G flat for six flats, but it also converts to F sharp because for the sharps, because those notes are the same on the guitar. Now, those are the notes on the outside, which these are all major scales. The scales on the inside are their relative minor scales. And what that means is that the minor scales that line up with the major scales, they share the same number of flats. So, for example, A minor and C, they are both completely natural scales. There's no sharps or flats in it. So, we have one sharp in our notes that we came across for our chords. So it's going to land on this spot on the circle of fifths. So we have our G major or E minor. Now, between E minor or G major, the way to determine which one it is typically by the sound of it. If it sounds pretty more melancholic, it's going to lead towards minor. If it's a little bit more upbeat, it's going to lead towards major. But also which chords stand out most prominently in the tune. And in our case, E minor is the very first chord of the most common progression in the tune. So my guess, if I had not written the song, would be this song is in E minor. And in fact, it is. That was the way it was written. Now it's your turn. Take a song you love and try to find the key using these methods. You can either listen by ear or by reading the chord chart without looking at the given key. Let me know in the comments which song you tried and what key you found. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more tips to take your music journey to the next level. Remember, finding the key of a song is a skill and it gets easier with practice. I'll see you in the next video.